Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good day. Folks are trickling in, but we do have a very tight agenda, so we'll probably get started in just within this minute or so. My name is Ria Perot. Thrilled to have everyone here. Thank you so much for making the time to join us this afternoon. So I'm going to get started. Welcome, and thanks so much for joining our webinar From Blueprint to Building, Scaling Innovative Decarbonization Technologies. As I just mentioned, my name is Ria Perot. I'm a Climate Programs Manager at MaRS Discovery District, and I lead our Mission for MaRS Better Buildings program. This is a very important and timely conversation. We know that Canada's building sector is really at a crossroads, either sticking to the status quo with insufficient housing supply, rising carbon emissions, a third of which is coming from buildings, and unattainable prices that we're all hearing about and in some cases experiencing ourselves. So we can stick to this current status quo, or we can try something new. We recently released our program report titled A New Blueprint, How Canada Can Improve Housing Affordability and Reduce Carbon Emissions, which discusses the generational opportunity that sits before us to invest in ourselves, generate positive impacts on the climate, the economy, and affordability, to modernize how we build and upgrade our buildings, and to reimagine the materials we use and how we use them. And today's webinar is really all about moving from blueprint to building and really just turning that opportunity into action. Let's switch to the agenda and logistics slide just to give you a sense of how packed this agenda is. Well, it looks pretty sparse, but we've got a lot planned for you. So we'll start with the panel discussion with our industry experts to unpack the key challenges and opportunities. And then we are absolutely thrilled to be announcing the 6 ventures selected for our new Better Buildings Adoption Accelerator cohort, made possible by the Peter Gilligan Foundation. And finally, we will be sharing a major announcement regarding our new RBC-sponsored corporate cohort and how industry can get involved. A couple of logistical points. The session is being recorded. You can submit questions via the Q&A function throughout the session. In particular, during our panel discussion, we'll be taking some audience questions there. Closed captioning is available at the bottom of the screen. And for questions and technical issues, feel free to use the chat function just to communicate with the MaRS team directly. But before jumping into all of this, I want to acknowledge that while this is a virtual event, MaRS is based at Toronto. That's where I'm calling in from. And it's the ancestral and present-day homelands and waterways of the Anishinaabeg, the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. The Métis people of Toronto and York regions have also settled their communities here. This is particularly important in the context of housing and development because while we are discussing the homes of people from really all walks of life and all over the world, be it descendants of early French and British settlers to recent immigrants, Canada, as we know, was the home of many Indigenous peoples for thousands of years before the arrival of the Europeans, and Canada's Indigenous peoples continue to call this land home today. Building for the future requires respecting the histories, rights, and knowledge of the communities that came from before us, including Indigenous communities. And so I encourage you to learn about the land you're calling in from, and we will share some resources as always to do that in the chat. A little bit about MaRS, just to kick us off. MaRS is North America's largest urban innovation hub. We own and operate the MaRS Center and the MaRS Waterfront Innovation Center, kind of giving us this physical presence in Toronto. But we're also a nonprofit supporting over 1,200 Canadian technology companies with business advisory, connections to capital, and ecosystem connectivity, including support with adoption and peer communities. Mission from MaRS is one of the ways in which we double down on supporting the adoption of innovation in key sectors for climate action. Under each mission, we're taking on a variety of activities and projects that mobilize industry leaders, facilitate cross-silo conversations and connections, and accelerate the growth of high-potential climate technologies on their pathway to adoption at scale. Currently, we have 4 missions, but today is all about our Better Buildings mission. And I'll share some more information about that on the next slide. So we launched a Mission for MaRS Better Buildings program back in 2024 with 3 key objectives: reducing the operational emissions of Canada's existing building stock through innovation adoption, accelerating the uptake of low-carbon building materials and methods to lower the embodied carbon of new builds, and finally, amplifying the role of Canadian cleantech to create a more adaptive and affordable built environment. Through this work, we have supported dozens of innovative Canadian building decarbonization technologies and worked with some really, really incredible leaders that are countering the risk aversion and inertia that the buildings industry faces and really making a difference. This is through our venture cohort, our innovation adopter network, our corporate cohort, and our coalition. So you can reach out to mfm at marsdd.com if you want to learn more about any of these programs and get involved in our work, particularly if you're in the multi-residential space, but more on that a little bit later. By way of introduction to our panel, today we're thrilled to be joined by 4 leading voices in the housing sustainability and innovation space. Brent Gilmore is the Chief Commercial Officer at CAGBC. Will Sutter is the Director of Housing Innovation at Groundbreak Ventures. Michelle Schwereb is the Innovation Director of the Americas at BDP Quadrangle. And John Lawrence is a journalist and editor at a range of media organizations, including the Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, Corporate Knights, and Spacing, where he is a senior editor. I'm so excited for this conversation. As mentioned, we'll have a short audience Q&A at the end, so please feel free to pop any questions in the Q&A function. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to John to kick off the panel discussion. Over to you, John. Sorry, John, you're muted.
Thanks very much, Ria. I'm very pleased to be able to moderate this conversation. As some of you may know, I write about cities a lot and real estate and development, and also clean tech. And this particular topic marries both of those areas and gives me an opportunity to interview really interesting people doing interesting things in the area of building innovation and clean building innovation. And so what we're going to do is have a bit of a conversation about some of the topics that have come up in the report and will be discussed further during this webinar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first put out a question to all 3 of the panelists, and we'll go from there. So the first thing that I really wanted to get at here has to do with the core message of the report, which is that we can achieve 3 major societal goals by focusing on making our buildings, both existing and new, more energy efficient using new technologies and processes. They will be more climate resilient and energy efficient. They'll be more affordable, and the investment in such housing stock will produce made in Canada economic growth. So can each of you connect these dots for me? How can we achieve all 3, and why is this a virtuous circle? Maybe I'll start with Brent.
Can you say again, John? Did you want me to start off?
Yeah. Why don't you go first?
Sure. Thanks, John. Appreciate it, and pleasure to join everyone online. And so when we look at this from the aspect of housing, I'll start there. The core point for us is that sustainability and affordability ultimately should not be treated as competing objectives. That's what a good chunk of what we've been talking about. When we think of innovation, better envelopes, energy efficient systems, heat pumps, smart controls, verified performance, all of which was covered in the report and insight, reduce that exposure to utility costs and improve comfort and resiliency. So ultimately, we're having to take a moment to understand and think through how do we actually start to better connect what we want to see in the future with what can be built today, with how we actually go about doing that. And when we step back, one of the key things we're trying to talk about here is that building that is cheaper to build out can be actually more expensive to operate, is not necessarily more affordable over time. And I think that's what a lot of the other speakers will convey. There's innovations that can cost more upfront, but they actually in the long term are better for those in that home and that multi-unit residential building. And how we help move that forward is a key part of where we want to go with our discussion, I think, today. So I'll let the others jump in.
Okay, Michelle, how about you?
Yeah, I could take it probably from a design side. I totally echo everything that Brent said. It's really taking it from start to finish, really from the earliest days of design, having these objectives in mind. It's not necessarily adding cost. There may be some percentage of cost, but by thinking about these things very, very early on, having your goals aligned, most of these things are mutually reinforcing. So if you're thinking about decarbonization and resilience together, often one design measure can result in moving you towards a solution for both things. Similarly, from the report, you talked about modern methods of construction, a great way to be able to control your waste, to be able to control the materials that are coming onto the site, to be able to have much better control over your building envelope or your structural or your quantities of materials. So in my mind, from a designer, it's really about having those goals right up front so that you can have a really integrated process that you're working through to meet all those objectives.
And Will, what about you from a point of view of a backer of new innovation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to build on what Brent introduced around the tension sometimes between upfront costs and operating costs. So I agree. I think the three goals are real and they're important, but I don't think they connect as automatically as maybe the framing suggests. And it's important to understand why. So better performing buildings generally, not always, but generally, cost more upfront. And in a market where developers are financing on tight margins, there's downward pressures on rents and asset values. Better over 30 years or better over the asset's lifespan just doesn't clear that hurdle today. So in our view at Groundbreak, the missing link isn't the technology. The technology is actually ready. It's that our financing, our insurance, our procurement systems still reward the lowest upfront cost over lifetime value. So the market just isn't necessarily set up today in a way that's ready to adopt innovations at scale. And we're really excited about the opportunity that is presented in closing that gap. And a good example of that in our own portfolio, we see it in companies that we back, particularly prefab builders that have a better product, have a lower life cycle cost, but still can't get a construction loan on the same terms that a conventional stick frame project would. So you kind of fix those systems level or adoption barriers, then the three goals genuinely reinforce one another. The energy savings are real, the resiliency from a climate perspective is real, and all of that can have downstream impact on affordability. That's certainly real. And what also drives our thinking at Groundbreak is if Canada gets that right and can unlock those things and have those goals genuinely reinforce one another, we just don't build better buildings. We have an opportunity here to build domestic industry around it. And that's the growth story that we're really excited about. And we think that's pretty undersold nationally today.
So let me just follow up with you, Will, on a related point. So at the moment, in some jurisdictions, we're seeing backsliding on some of the green building policies, such as the Toronto Green Standard and others. And developers have argued that these rules add unnecessary cost. So what arguments would be more persuasive in the wake of this policy backsliding, for instance, regarding productivity?
Yeah. Yeah, the backsliding's happening because the conversation got framed as environment versus cost. And if that's the frame, then developers will always win that argument in a housing crisis, particularly because nobody really wants to hear build greener when the actual headline reads there's not enough homes. So the first move, in my view, is to adjust the frame. The question shouldn't necessarily be how much does green policy cost? It's really why is the Canadian construction sector so and increasingly so unproductive and what fixes that? Because those turned out to be the same problem. In fact, the MaRS Blueprint for New Housing report references the findings from the Center for the Study of Living Standards in Ottawa that estimates that lost productivity from just 2019 to 2024 added $6 to $8 billion to new construction, housing construction costs. That accounts for almost a 20% increase in the price of a new home. So the conversation has to be framed around productivity. And at Groundbreak, we think about technology across the entire housing value chain, from design, financing, constructions through to asset operations. And what's striking to us is that the biggest productivity gains at each at each of those stages tend to come from the same interventions that also improve sustainability outcomes. Better design software reduces waste and speeds approvals. Prefab and modular cuts build time and material use. As Michelle mentioned, or smart building systems lower operating costs and energy consumption, like Brent mentioned. So they're not trade-offs, they're actually the same investment. So the most persuasive argument is not, you need to be greener. It's here, developers, this is how you build faster, cheaper, and with less risk.
So, Michelle, from the point of view of a designer and an architect, how do these principles land with you? Like, how do you sort of incorporate these objectives of increasing the productivity of the construction sector within your, within your work, and ensure that it passes through to the general contractor and so on?
In terms of productivity, I think part of it is really about, again, the design process itself, who the target market is. So, I mean, one of the things I wanted to clarify in this is who that developer is and what they're trying to get out of it. Because you've got the long-term hold developer whose objectives are going to be very different from someone who's short-term hold. So part of our discussion around value has really been this sort of sea change that we've seen in this past year around a shift to rental housing, a shift to affordable housing. So I think the goalposts have changed a little bit so that we're thinking a little bit more long term. And I think that makes a huge difference because that allows us to talk about things like future proofing. So we can talk about things like, you mentioned controls and all of those pieces, which are wonderful for operations. You can design those things in. A lot of those sensors you can even use all the way through construction. I was thinking of an innovation that was used on a project to detect flooding during construction, and those sensors being embedded in the concrete slab allowed that particular developer to get cheaper rates for their insurance when it came time because they were able to use that to say, well, now I've got this added layer of protection. So I think that's a piece of it as well, is this start to finish type technology. It has a really good delivers value through the entire life cycle. And then when we talk about future proofing, thinking a little bit about resilience, because if you are looking at this from the perspective of an insurance provider, what you've seen is, record catastrophic losses in the past decades, things that we've never seen before. So anything you can do to future-proof that building and retain that asset value over time rather than just thinking in the short term, because the last thing you want is a stranded asset, something that's not designed from day one to deal with flooding, that's not designed to deal with overheating.
So I just have a very quick follow-up question for you. Do you think that insight is spreading to the short hold builders now, acknowledging that we're not building a lot of condos at the moment?
Yeah, that was gonna be my response, is that there isn't a lot being built. But what I can tell you is about the existing building side. So Sustainable Buildings Canada has a program called Better Condos Boot Camp, and it's actually they got some funding to do this where they're running sessions, so full day long workshops with people on the condo board. So they have to bring 3 members from their condo board there, and they're giving them a full day of education about their fiduciary responsibility, what it means long term to them to decarbonize. Because again, with existing buildings, we've got sort of long term policy that's going to move us towards decarbonizing these buildings. And as a condo owner, what does that mean to me? And so this program is designed to help people work through that. And there's all kinds of different programs and incentives available. And in my mind, decarbonization partnered with resiliency planning, that's really the key, is you do both of those things at the same time to get you to where you need to go.
So, Brett, the question for you, the we tend to silo public policy conversations about affordable housing and climate, although there are obvious synergies, and this is, we've seen this already in the conversation so far and in the report. So what do we need to do to tether these two policy objectives more closely, in the mind of decision makers?
Thank you, John. And I think Will and Michelle have picked up on excellent salient points within all of this already. It's how we look at affordability. We tend to come at it with a very narrow perspective, and it's reasonable given the pressures that everyone is facing. It's not only rent or first cost, it's looking at the totality. It's utility costs, insurance, maintenance, comfort. Michelle talked about this, about owners and condos, whether it's renters. They all look at various things, which is the bottom line for their day-to-day and for a long-term operational risk too. And so this policy shift that we're asking people to get into is to move from climate as a requirement or an added requirement to performance as part of that durable affordability. How do you withstand and respond to what is beyond your immediate understanding or daily control, to having some sort of assurance that you know that this has been well thought through? And these measures are viable. We've been talking about them. It's where you start. Better envelopes is day one, maybe later on in your retrofit, or the efficient mechanical systems people have been talking about, ventilation, controls. The average homeowner is not worrying about the renter, but those who are building are at the beginning, from the architecture, engineering, and consulting community to those who are also in policy trying to figure out where do they intervene that's meaningful without creating additional cost. That's why the programs we've already seen, whether it's the CMHC linked financing, it's doing well, and it can do more to help reward those measured outcomes. It's not focusing up front, it's the outcome that matters. Your lower energy use, your lower carbon, your resiliency, and the cost predictability that we are all after. And that is an important direction that we're trying to get to. So ultimately, I think what we're trying to move towards is to stop asking whether housing policy or climate policy comes first. The better question, I think what we're trying to answer, is how we make high performance housing. It's just the default affordability strategy. And that is a longer term process that we've now started, and you're seeing across Canada, federally and provincially, asking those important questions. And I'll give you an example. Carry On Home Warranty Program surveys everyone who buys a home and also those who build them. And among the top 2023 and 2024, 2025 is coming out soon, among the top answers of what was important for people: cost, of course, we know that; 2, size; 3, energy efficiency. People are very attuned to cost, and they know that stays with the property they're owning or they're renting in. And we need to look at this aspect of how do we support that going forward when we make these policy trade-offs.
So just a quick follow-up question for you, Brent. Like, do policymakers have proof points of what we're talking about? Like, I mean, this is talked in aspirational tones and their terms, and CA, like the Green Building Council had this report out recently that has, case studies. Like, are there a sufficient number of proof points to
Yes.
convince policymakers?
So the word's convince. I think it's a tone between what's currently on the minds of the average voter and what can policy respond to that's reasonable. And no one is one single expert, and it all requires these systems to align. So I think what they're looking for is, in some cases, is policy certainty, but simplicity. We tend to get ourselves a little bit too caught up in that you can fix it all. And I think what we're driving towards in all of this is to move away. I think your answer is to move away from a fragmented policy environment. It needs a clear performance signal. Policymakers get that. They can send signals. They can do that very well. They don't need to have all the insights, all the innovations, all the technology. They need to know that, will this move the market where it needs to go and where we need to build around? And that's what we're talking about. Yes, I think it's there. The question is, can we bring it back in a federal provincial harmony is the job and direction that we're all working on right now. And I think there's some room to continue to help make that happen.
Okay, so I'd like to just sort of shift the conversation a little bit to the innovation aspect of this topic. And so, Michelle, there's been a ton of discussion in the past couple of years about the subject of modular, factory-built housing, modern methods of construction, and so on. And there are a range of competing approaches, including volumetric, flat packs, precision engineered components and machinery, and so on. So what would you say as a designer is the sweet spot in terms of marrying these technologies to various forms of development? Like how do we sort of cross that bridge?
I think part of it, and again, can only speak from the side of a designer, would be
Right.
to first understand the ecosystem, what's out there, what systems are available, what systems make sense for what scale, and to just start. So we've done a couple of projects. We did one which was mass timber, and so we used, it was basically we were working with a factory that was building a machine in order to make our product. So if you think about the maturity cycle with where the materials we're used to working with, the maturity is here. The whole industry understands them. You think of where we are in, when you're using a brand new innovative material, you're down here. And so part of it is that you have to be willing to work through that with the manufacturer, with the contractor, with the owner, and sort of building these trusted relationships with them. So we had that one that was mass timber. We had another one where we used sort of, you mentioned a flat pack panelized system. So we did that. The first time we did it up to 4 stories. And we had designed it to take the load of 6 stories because the building code was changing. And we shifted from that to they ended up being in such high demand, they sold so quickly that we never got to 6, but the 6 could be built. We recently realized a 6-story one in the same material. And then I wanted to build on something that Brent had talked about. He was talking about, kind of net zero buildings as well and CMHC funding. And so here's a place where funding and sort of the background pieces of it allowed us to do a net zero building, which is just coming online. It's been recently topped off. And it's a building in Etobicoke where we used a full panelized modular precast system. And that was for the structural system as well as the wall system. They installed all the windows in the factory. So you're getting very good seals. The workers are safe when they're doing it. You've got really high quality control, material control. And we could do that up to a certain number of stories. And with that, again, to speak to design process, we worked very closely with them all the way through. And then once we got to the topping off, we brought everybody in, all the key trades, and we said, what went right, what went wrong, what did we learn, and what can we do next time? So the idea is that each time you learn something and you get better, and you learn and you get better, because the process is different and the system is not set up. Will mentioned the financing isn't necessarily set up. And those are really big hurdles, and you have to have kind of the will to push through those hurdles to make them happen because there are materials out there that work. And I'd say the low-hanging fruit is kind of panelized construction. We understand that. We've been doing it for a long time. And from a designer perspective, it's learn that ecosystem and start.
Mhm. Uh, could you do a shout out for the client there and
Yeah, it was
the type of project?
Kingset Capital. It was Valhalla Village. And so it's an 11-story affordable housing project that we built. And we've taken loads of people through it. And I think the other piece of it I would say is share it. Share it, walk people through it, share everything that you're learning so that others are learning. And I think that's been actually one of the most wonderful things about this, decarbonization in general and innovation is that there has really become such a culture of knowledge sharing, which I think is huge for anything that you're doing that is new. Because you're taking a risk. When you're trying something new, you're taking a risk. So build that partnership, build that trust, and keep learning and sharing.
Could you share like one or two insights that you gleaned from that project?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would say, and this was sort of an unexpected consequence of it, was that they actually saved 50% on winter heat. So that's a huge impact in terms of embodied carbon. That's a huge cost savings on site. Another piece that I would say is getting the trades to understand one another is so understanding the logistics of what goes in first. Where's the air seal? Where's the water seal? How does it change what they're doing? And making sure that they're speaking to each other along the way and learning from those things. So I'd say those were kind of the biggest ones.
Okay, so Will, as I mentioned before, I mean, Groundbreak has a pipeline of these kind of innovations, and so what I'd like you to do is tell me a little bit about what you're seeing, like what's in your pipeline,
Hmm.
um, and what's the investment thesis that you're working towards with these kinds of innovations. Be
Yeah,
specific too.
Yeah, let me maybe give some context too about Groundbreak. So we're the most active investor in Canada in early stage construction and housing technologies. We have made over 30 investments out of our first vehicle and are raising our second, and we invest across Canada, US, and Europe. And to the point around our thesis and how that's evolving, we've been observing a shift in venture across all of those markets that we think doesn't get talked about enough in a housing context. So for more than a decade, venture capital specifically, has chased software. So SaaS, digital platforms, apps. That cycle's turning. It's turning back towards hardware, physical infrastructure, companies that build tangible things. And the last time I looked, I think hardware tech investment has grown about 40% in terms of the overall share of venture capital investment globally over just the last 3 years. And that trend is continuing to grow. The last time I saw numbers coming out of 2025. So housing sits right at the center of that shift. And if you think about a couple of specific examples about how that translates to an investment thesis and the areas that we're paying close attention to. First, think about AI applied to design and construction execution. So tools that accelerate how buildings get designed, coordinate trades on site, compress permitting timelines, and let small teams manage complex projects at a larger scale, at an enterprise scale that they may not have been able to do otherwise. So the construction site is still shockingly manual, and this is obviously an incredible opportunity from a venture perspective. Secondly, robotics and automation. As we all know here, the labor shortage in trades is it's structural, not cyclical. So the companies building autonomous systems, and we have a couple of them here in Canada doing a lot of great work in this space. I know that the report shouts out Promise Robotics, certainly a leader in robotic and autonomous systems used for construction, housing construction in particular. It's the companies that build these systems to augment parts of physical workflows that don't have enough workers that are going to have enormous tailwinds. Um, you know, so in our view, to summarize kind of a thesis, we see it as obviously AI is what everyone's talking about today. But the opportunity isn't AI or the real economy. It's AI applied to real assets and physical workflows. So we're looking for those workflows that are still highly manual, because what they do is you're not betting on convincing the market that this technology matters. The demand is already there. We have a 5 to 10 million unit housing deficit across North America. That's not going to go away, and we don't have the resources to possibly address that. Even if you look at the peak of housing delivery in Canada, we've never been able to get to a pace of construction that would meet what CMHC tells us is required from a delivery standpoint to address the housing crisis. So the demand's there. Technology that bridges AI and physical workflows already have customers waiting for them. And we see that as powerful tailwind for companies in this space. And that's what we're focused on over this next fund vehicle.
So Brett, quickly on this point, you guys put out this report on retrofits. And so give me a couple of things that you're seeing in the innovation space that's focused on retrofits.
Happy to. Thank you. And I think Will cited a variety of ways you can see the growth in the market for innovation and retrofits. I think Michelle mentioned it too. There's not an immediate amount of new development, and most of what we're going to need or have by 2050 is already here, 75% of most building types. And so when we think about what we're going to be seeing is a lot of deep retrofit. The question is, what's an innovation in deep retrofit? And it comes back to something we've all mentioned in different ways. That innovation is getting right back to the fundamentals. It's really good planning. And it might not sound highly innovative, but when that unlocks billions in opportunity for investment, thousands of job creations from every part from coast to coast, it is a significant innovation. How you go about doing that is something that we've been encouraging through the work on the Transition Planning Accelerator. And so one area for people to visit is transitionplanningnow.ca, but also deepretrofitsnow.ca is another great place for people to take a look to see what is being done in the market right now through a transition accelerator, which is a great point. Their purpose building has been advancing as part of support from Natural Resources Canada, has already looked at transition planning for about 1,300 or more buildings. It's showcased in the report as well. What could be done? And the takeaway beyond the bottom line that it's about a $10 per square foot incremental cost to get a 40% additional reduction in greenhouse gas emissions is just that. You need to do a little bit more capital planning and how you link that to your existing building replacement period. Every building has a natural life cycle. It's actually known, and you can plan for that, and you can work with your investors to look at what's the best timing and the best cycle relative to what might make sense, whether it's heat pumps, controls, AI-enabled optimization, envelope upgrades, energy recovery, better metering. Each one of them on their own can provide a significant outcome of performance enhancement, energy cost saving, and an improved risk resilient asset going forward. So they seem incremental, but when in the totality over the life of a building of 50 years, they're huge. And that's the part that's really missing. We tend to think very narrowly of the time frame, but buildings don't follow policy. They follow a natural cycle of stepped improvements, and they tend to be known periods, 5, 10, 25, 50. You can do a lot, and we can build around that and actually have a significant climate competitiveness strategy through energy efficiency from coast to coast.
Okay, so Michelle, just do a couple more questions here. What if you had to pick a policy innovation that kind of aims at this center of the Venn diagram between affordability, productivity, and climate that you've seen in other jurisdictions anywhere? What would it be? What could we bring into the Canadian conversation that's not here?
When I thought about this one, in my mind, it wasn't specifically a policy. It was more a way of people who are implementing policy joining the conversation. So rather than it being a specific policy, so I was speaking to a colleague in Rotterdam recently, and resilience is something, you know, they're below sea level. So they've got a vested interest in thinking about this. And on this panel that we were having this discussion, and they had this program out of the University of Delft, and it was called the Hop, Step, Jump. And I found this fascinating because what it was a place very similar to MaRS, actually, where the idea behind it was to have the researchers there doing the deep research, doing the work, and to have it be a place where the entrepreneurs come in, but also where the public policy partners come in, and they go there, they see, they experience, they touch this thing. And this place, when you're in the hop stage of this is really about very low requirements on it, very low regulatory environment so that things could be tested and played with. When you get to the step, this is where the policymakers come in and start to participate in the process and open up spaces where you might test this in a real world space. And so whether it's the city opening up a space to test something or on public lands or in a public building, taking that, testing it, and from there moving it to regulation. So when I thought about this in terms of policy, it was really about finding an innovation pathway through policy by getting policymakers engaged in innovation from the beginning, from the hop, the step, and the jump. Because I thought that was absolutely fabulous because it brought everyone together and aligned people on something very, very real, where they were applying it to projects. They could understand it, and then they could properly implement policy around it.
Okay, so I have one last question for Will. And for the audience, if you'd like to ask questions of any of the individual panelists, just tag them in the Zoom and they'll try to get back to you. So Will, looking at what's in your pipeline and looking at the opportunities that are sort of, germinating in Canada, like, what's the opportunity for the companies that you're backing internationally? Like, how are we exporting what we're learning to other parts of the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's been a lot of challenge over the past couple of decades, especially in this sector, with exporting these types of innovations. It definitely depends what you're building. There's a different set of challenges if you're building a prefab or modular system to export that there are obviously export controls, and when you're shipping physical product, depending where you're manufacturing it, and then when you add on all of the code uncertainty and some of the challenges in overcoming hurdles around acceptance from local jurisdictions and from the code. There's challenge there. We see a lot of opportunity again on the AI side for general export of technologies. The challenge is, and we talked about this generally right now, there's not a lot of building happening, particularly on the private sector side. So in terms of adoption, we see the first step of exporting is actually adoption, and where we'll see a lot of that adoption and what we're trying to create some connective tissue between is what's happening on the public sector through agencies like Build Canada Homes, through CMHC, and using the power of procurement to test and pilot new design and construction methods and materials at scale. So there's a degree, so we're building confidence on Canadian innovation that can be exported. I think there needs to be kind of a tipping point or a mass scale of adoption before we can see confidence in other public agencies around the world who are experiencing similar market conditions right now, where there's not a lot of private market development happening. So working with government, I think, is going to be a key component to thinking about kind of an export strategy. And that's something that we spend a lot of time here at Groundbreak thinking about, is how to create that connective tissue and how government can use its procurement power to create adoption and create new pathways for exporting outside of Canada in other sort of public-led projects.
Okay, this is great. I'd like to thank Brent Gilmore from the Canadian Green Building Council, Ms. Michelle Schwerb from BDP Quadrangle, and Will Sutter from Groundbreak Ventures, excuse me. And so I'm going to now pass it back to Olivia Lang, who's going to talk about the new cohort.
I'll just pass it to Ria.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Well, thank you, panelists, for such a great discussion. I think the fact that we went right up to time really just reflects the depth of the opportunity and all the nuances in really harnessing it. So thank you to the panelists for lending their expertise. We heard about the importance of transformative technologies, and we're so excited to be sharing our next cohort of incredible building decarbonization technologies with you all. These are technologies that have applicability to residential buildings, both new builds and retrofits. It was a very rigorous and very competitive application process. We ended up recruiting a half dozen more to the MaRS portfolio, but we're so excited to be announcing the 6 companies we will be working with for the rest of the year in our Better Buildings Adoption Accelerator, made possible by the Peter Gilligan Foundation. So excited by the caliber of the companies and the founders behind them. So without further ado, passing it back to my colleague Olivia Lang to introduce us to the first company.
Awesome. So we're really excited. First up, we have Phil from Cura Climate. Phil, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Cement is responsible for about 8% of global CO2 emissions, and the hard part isn't the fuel, it's the chemistry. When you heat limestone to make cement, it chemically releases CO2, and you can't out-efficient your way of this problem. The only current fix is point source carbon capture and storage, but that triples the cost of cement. Our electrochemical technology uses clean electricity to strip carbon directly out of limestone way before it enters the kiln. What's left goes into a standard kiln to produce ordinary Portland cement, same supply chain, 85% fewer emissions, independently validated at today's market price. And the market is already saying yes. We've signed MOUs with Acciona, Aecon, Titan, Mullins, covering material testing, pilot partnerships, and procurement agreements for flagship construction projects across Canada and Europe. Canadian infrastructure is being built right now, and our partners want to build it with low carbon cement. This isn't a future technology. We've launched a mini pilot. We're building our first pilot now, and we've earned our first revenue, all within just 5 months of being founded. So we're now raising an $8 million seed round to scale, and we're super grateful to MaRS for selecting us to be part of this Better Buildings Accelerator to help us get there. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. We're really excited to have you. And now next up is Nick from Morgan Solar.
Hi, I'm Nick Morgan. I'm one of the co-founders of and VP of Biz Dev at Morgan Solar. So we're a Toronto-based cleantech company, and we've been doing some very exciting things in developing new technology for buildings. We are looking at ways to unlock the potential of facades, windows, turn them into elements that can generate electricity, improve the building efficiency, and integrate seamlessly or even enhance the design of a building. We have won numerous awards for our energy blinds technology, which has been installed here in Toronto and a number of places, as well as a few places outside of the city. It's still an early days technology, but the energy blinds at Cisco Innovation Center downtown are powering a conference room. We've won awards for the Bank of Montreal data center up in Scarborough, and the Bridlewood Library image you can see in the top corner, real showcase of how design and aesthetics can take a solar asset, a functional part of the building, and turn it into a community landmark. So we're doing interesting things with building facades and energy, and we're most interested in talking about energy blinds right now. But if you've got a building and you've got an efficiency problem with your facade, come talk to us.
Thanks so much, Nick. Next up is Parinaz from Packville.
Hi, my name is Parinaz. I'm the founder and CEO of Packville. At Packville, we invented a faster way to build housing at a scale. If you can go to the next slide, please. We, in fact, manufacture construction panels that are shipped to the job site on standard trucking. We use these panels for floors, walls, and ceilings. Our panels are meticulously engineered and manufactured, so they go together like large pieces of Legos. Our panels replace up to 7 different components that have been traditionally used to build homes. They replace lumber, insulation, plywood, and so on. And because we're reducing the number of the components, we get to complete building a structure instead of 8 to 9 months. We reduce that to 2 to 3 weeks. And therefore, our buildings are significantly less expensive compared to traditional built homes. We use our panels to build single-family homes and multi-story residential buildings. We already built 4 units, and if you are interested to use our products on your next project, feel free to reach out directly to me or check our website. Thank you.
Thanks, Parinaz. Next, we have Justin from Keytech.
Yeah, hi. So Keytech uses proprietary AI, drones, and thermography to conduct detailed analysis of the building envelope. If you could flip to the next slide, it'll show you a bit of a demo, but we accurately pinpoint issues, quantify energy loss, and recommend targeted measures that optimize energy efficiency, operational costs, and return on investment for your buildings. We have over 100 clients, including major Fortune 500 companies like Amazon. We've completed over 1,300 major building envelope projects across North America, Europe, and Asia as well. We're very excited to be part of the Better Buildings Accelerator and looking forward to meeting with all the partners and organizations. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Justin. Excited to have you. Next, we have Alejandro from Regino.
Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Alejandro Gaviria. I'm the CEO at Regino. At Regino, we contribute to reduce up to 50% of energy billings for heating domestic hot water. And we are able to do that because we have created a solution that recovers heat from wastewater in multi-unit residential buildings. So this system is ready. We are a Quebec-based company. We have deployed close to 35 systems here in Quebec. Our next steps will be going through Ontario, and we have delivered also our first system as a proof of concept in France this week, actually. So we are celebrating that milestone. So I will be eager to discuss more about the opportunities with you. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thanks. Last but not least, we have Sandy from TwinGlaze.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sandy Wilson. I'm the CEO and founder of TwinGlaze. What TwinGlaze is solving is what we call the retrofit problem. When we talk about commercial buildings, both residential and office, built prior to 1990, many billions of square feet in North America still have single pane windows, and it is totally unaffordable to replace those windows. Unlike other window insert products, we actually offer a system that allows a regular double pane sealed glass unit to be installed up against the inside of a single pane window. And in the process, we reduce heat loss through that window by 85%. And we do it for 10 times lower cost than actually replacing the window, getting us to paybacks as low as 5 years for the product. We are raising $2 million to meet the demand following our 2 pilot projects here in Vancouver. And if this is an interesting product to you, please reach out through the website or whatever means necessary. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Just a huge congratulations again to all 6 of our cohort members. We're really looking forward to working with you, and there's so much promise here, so we're really excited. And a reminder to our audience also that you can reach out to the MFM email that is in the Zoom chat to get an introduction to any of these companies, and I'll share their websites in just a second in the chat. I'll now pass it over to my colleague Mick for our next exciting announcement.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Olivia. Hello, everyone. My name is Mick Malawani. I'm part of MaRS's corporate innovation team, and we work closely with Ria and her team on delivering the corporate cohort component of the Better Buildings mission. I'm here today to tell you about an exciting new cohort we're launching this summer. This is the Better Buildings Multi-Residential Business Cohort. Next slide, please. So this is a program MaRS is offering in partnership with RBC's Community Investment Initiative to help owners, operators, and developers of multi-unit residential buildings to integrate cleantech into their assets. The goal here is to find those win-win connections where a technology upgrade can improve the performance of a building, both from a financial perspective and a climate perspective. The program offers a number of benefits, so you can unlock up to $45,000 of funding for performance audits and/or clean tech deployment projects. You'll drive greater operational efficiency and resilience by installing made-in-Canada clean tech upgrades in your buildings. And you'll be strengthening your innovation credentials, which can help you qualify for support from programs like Build Canada Homes, and also just be seen as a leader in the building innovation space in general. Next slide. So the program will launch this July and will be delivered in 2 phases. I'll gloss over these real quick. The first 6 months is primarily MaRS-led, so we'll run you through a series of capability building workshops to help build the foundation for a successful collaboration with a startup. This is a relatively light commitment, about 6 sessions of 60 to 90 minutes each for 1 or 2 people from your organization, and again, spread over 6 months. After that, we transition into execution for the remainder of the program. So this phase is actually about getting projects off the ground, getting the benefits flowing, measuring the advantage that these clean tech upgrades are providing, and then documenting that advantage in a case study. These activities will be primarily led by the cohort participants, but with plenty of support from MaRS to keep projects moving towards successful outcomes. The 6 ventures that we just heard from today are great examples of the types of technology we're looking to help you install. But we'll be drawing from the entire MaRS network and beyond to find the best possible fit with your buildings. And next slide. So our application period just opened yesterday. So if you represent a company that develops, owns, and/or operates multi-res buildings in Canada, we encourage you to apply, especially if your business has an ESG mandate, a long investment horizon, multiple buildings in your portfolio, and particularly if you have a retrofit or upgrade project planned within the next 5 years. We'd love to take advantage of any early planning steps you might have already taken to get some of these projects off the ground. I should emphasize that this is just a rough profile. We still welcome your application, even if you don't check every one of these boxes. At the end of the day, the most important things we're looking for in an applicant are the motivation to make your buildings more resource efficient and the decision-making power to actually execute on that. Otherwise, we have no restrictions on portfolio size, building characteristics, or ownership structure. And next slide. So if you're interested in the program, please do fill out an application. Our application window runs until June 17th, but we are assessing prospective applicants on a rolling basis, so it pays to apply early. You can find the link to our webpage and application form in the chat, and it will be in the follow-up email to this webinar as well. And if you have any questions about the program, you can consult that same webpage, send us an email at mfm@marsdd.com, and/or attend one of our applicant info sessions. Those will be on May 13th and June 3rd. And the links to register for those should be posted on our webpage in the next few days. Finally, if any orgs in your network might be a good fit for the program, please do share that link from the chat with them. We really appreciate the referral, and we hope to see them hopefully at one of those applicant info sessions. And that's it for me. Thanks so much. I don't know if I'm passing it back to Ria or Olivia, but yeah.
Hey, thanks so much, Mick. And thank you for sharing. And if you are interested, we really do encourage you to check out that link in the chat to learn more about the corporate cohort. If you're not a multi-residential owner, operator, or developer, but active in the industry, there are other opportunities to join in our work through our Innovation Adopter Network or otherwise. So please do reach out to mfm@marsdd.com to get involved there, or if you'd like to get connected to any of the companies you heard from today. Once again, a big thank you to each of those companies for your presentations. We're so excited to work with you. And just one final note for our attendees. We do have a quick survey that we ask you all to fill out if you can spare a moment or two just to let us know what you thought. But aside from that, we'll just extend our gratitude for joining. I'm glad you could make it and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, everyone. Take care.